digital sewing machine. So we're going to go over that, and today I'm really excited to hop back on here and do this live Workshop Wednesday. So welcome to Workshop Wednesday, welcome to my workshop, and I get to finally sew after so many weeks of putting together the Sew Like a Pro series, which was so fun. If you follow me and have seen that, then thanks for joining me. I had a ton of fun interviewing all the experts, and I do look forward to doing a series similar to that in the future. But today, we're going to look just at my machine here, this Juki. It is a DL9000B SS, and just like regular household sewing machines, there's a lot of similarities. You may see a little bit of difference just in the thread. Here, I'm losing my train of thought already, but in just how it's set up to thread it, but it will be pretty much basically the same. You'll have kind of the pre-threading, you'll have the tension area, and then of course the thread guides as it goes into the needle. But we're going to get started today with looking at how to make a bobbin, because bobbin is really important to having your machine threaded properly, and also to get that tension right, because as we all know, if we sew, if the tension's not right, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. It's not going to look or turn out very well or nice at all. So I've got to sew something with this dark blue thread. So we're going to start out with that, and we're going to start out with our bobbin. So the way my bobbin actually works, I'm just going to hop on here and zoom out a little bit. You have kind of the upper holder for that thread. So we're going to feed this through as it goes through the top here for our bottom, and then bring it back down, and then look at threading this bobbin itself. So my bobbin actually has this tension knob here, and this is quite common for an industrial machine, that you can actually adjust the tension when threading your bobbin. So for this machine, we feed it through and wrap it around, and then through the tension discs themselves for the bobbin. So I'm just going to feed it through. Here, the tension discs are always on, so you really have to make sure that your thread runs through it. Whereas on the sewing machine, if you lift your pressure foot, then it just releases the tension. So here, we got to make sure that the thread is all the way through and then out the other side. And I like to just start by feeding my thread through one of the holes on the bobbin. We'll pop it on here, and then, oh, I'm just saying I'm kind of in a shadow. That's the fun of doing a live, hey? So we're going to close this up so that we can get the bobbin rolling here, and then I'm going to turn on my machine so that we can just spin this bobbin. So after doing a couple of rounds, I always like to kind of check. You can see visually if your bobbin is rolling nicely, but also check throughout that the tension of the bobbin is really nice. And since I've started, I'm just going to pull that off and keep going. Because you don't want your bobbin to be wrapped too loose or too tight. This is seeming really nice. It's going on nice and smooth, nice and evenly. If your bobbin is wrapped too tightly, then it kind of stretches the thread. And what can happen is after you sew a seam and you leave the garment for a couple hours and come back to it, is that the tension can kind of, or the thread rather, will relax and go back to its original length. And then you'll have kind of puckering along your stitch. So if that thread is overstretched, it can really cause problems later on. You also don't want your bobbin to be too loose, otherwise it will be kind of tangly, you won't be able to get as much thread on there, and it can also cause problems if that thread is too loose. So having the tension on the industrial machine is really, really, really nice to have, to just ensure that your bobbin is getting wound nice and smooth. Okay, that's probably enough, so I'm just going to leave it at that. I've got a nice little handy thread cutter here on my machine as well. So that's how you can make a bobbin for your industrial machine. And then we're just going to zoom out again real quick. Hopefully it's not too shaky. And I'm going to just pull this thread out of here and move it over. So I'll move it over to get it threaded in the actual machine. Swing this over. Just gonna grab my scissors here so we have a nice crisp end, and come over to the machine as it is. Let's see if we can get some better lighting for this part. And zoomed in a little closer. So you'll notice, even if you've never used an industrial machine or seen one, that all sewing machines are really similar, even if it is just a regular household machine. So there's definitely that pro to how sewing machines are set up, that even if you've never done it before, there's a lot of similarities. So this machine, once it comes off the spool itself, we go down into this kind of pre-thread holder, and it just wraps around the back and then goes through the side hole. Then we come over to the front, and we're going to loop through the pre-tension. So there's a little tension wheel here as well as on the front. And I'm actually, oh, the pressure foot is up, so we're going to just leave it like that and make sure that you're in between the discs and through the thread guide at the bottom. And just like any other machine, we want to then go through the tension discs, wrap back into the tension spring there, and under the thread guide to go up to here, this thread, the lifter here. So we're going to go through the top loop as it's up at the top and back down, and you'll have a couple of thread guides. So every machine is different, so I would really just encourage you to Google your machine if you don't have the user's manual. And then I'm just going to bring the needle up and put it through this last thread guide before we go through the needle. So I always like to put the pressure foot down to thread the needle just because it gives me more space, but it is important to have that pressure foot up when you're threading through the tension. So then I'm going to grab out the spool case. So here, the spool case on an industrial machine looks exactly like any old spool case. Yeah, let's see if we can get it in the light. On any other machine. So I'm just going to set my bobbin inside here, wrap it through and underneath the spring on the outside of the spool case. And it's really important to also check the tension of the spool itself. This is really good. It should come out with just a little bit of resistance. So if it's just unrolling too quickly, you can tighten up this larger screw, the second screw. So this one here, tighten it up. If it's too tight and your thread isn't coming out at all, then you'll need to just adjust that screw there for your tension on the bobbin itself. And this just pops in underneath the table. So this would be a little bit too tricky to see in the dark underneath. So I'm just going to reach under here and pop it in. It definitely will click. And then I'm just going to turn to create one stitch and pull up my thread from the bottom. So it really is as easy as that. And as I mentioned, it's mostly in kind of the thread guides that there will be differences up at the top. As for what machine you have, this area is pretty standard on industrial and household alike, as I mentioned. And so I hope that helps and you kind of feel a little bit more comfortable with how an industrial machine works. I do love industrial machines. They just sew so nicely. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting on my machine today, and I get to spend a couple of hours here and then start making a new wedding dress. So I'll probably be using that as examples for some of my next workshop Wednesdays. Thanks for joining me, and have a fantastic day on this Wednesday and my first YouTube Live. Bye now.